and welcome to another edition, this year's first edition of Ciao Falmouth. This is the program where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with the world language in the Falmouth Public Schools and in the community. There are many things that go on in the community, but I'd like to recap some things that teachers and I have been involved in since last edition of this program in the spring. Starting with this summer, world language teachers and I were fortunate to have a Department of Ed grant last year and conducted a lot of proficiency testing in the spring, both here and at the Lawrence Junior High, which we used as final exams. So to follow up on that, I got in touch with one of the textbook. I don't think she's an editor. I think they're the creators of the online textbook. And she provided a consultant who would go through data analysis, in other words, looking at the exam results with myself and teachers so that they could understand what the scoring meant to their teaching and for their students, and to guide us forward in how to use that information to chart this year's course of instruction. Now, there are two prongs to that. There's that piece, and there's the new world language standards, which I'll get into in a minute. So we spent a day last summer, right before we came back to school, looking at data and trying to figure out what to do with it. And the to-do part was teachers developed their professional practice and their student growth goals based on the information that they uncovered in this summer session. And that's the way that stands. Most of that is a two-pronged. The professional practice goal revolves around what's called the Standard Alignment Guide or the Curriculum Alignment Guide that's part of the new world language standards that the Department of Ed has developed. There's a lengthy unit guide, and we're now in the process of transitioning our understanding by design units of instruction into this newer format. It requires teachers to teach for proficiency and revolves around the three modes of interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive. And it adds an intercultural component, along with social emotional learning, social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, differentiation, and a variety of other things that require teachers to be reflective, obviously have essential questions, can-do statements, and is based on the standards, which were brand new in the spring of 2021. Last year, the Department of Ed conducted a lot in conjunction with CAL, which is the Center for Applied Linguistics, a lot of modules, which we've gone through 8 of them, and there are 14 in total, and curriculum alignment labs to help teachers understand the newer elements and apply them. I, myself, am part of the volunteer implementation team for the Latin teachers who have come up with 4 or 5 of these units. And the second goal, the student growth goal, looks at writing and speaking and what teachers are going to do based on a rubric and the prompts to make sure that students, they incorporate the information that they learned this summer and moving students forward. And next week we have an in-service day where we're going to do a calibration of French 1 and Spanish 1 writing samples to align them to the prompt and the rubric. And eventually we'll get to the upper levels so that teachers, the idea about calibration is that Spanish 1 is Spanish 1 is Spanish 1, and French 1 is French 1 is French 1, Latin 1 is Latin 1, so that the same skill development occurs at the end of grade 8 at Lawrence as it does here in grade 9 if the student is at level 1. Students should be at the same skill development, so teachers need to understand that. And teachers of Spanish 2 need to know what goes on in level 3 and level 3 and level 4, etc. So it's a smooth continuum, and eventually the grid of units has the AP samples themes starting on the left with novice high and goes across the continuum to advanced low. And every section has some unit in there that applies to each one of those 6 themes of aesthetics, community, etc., environment, things like that. So that was August and September. We have just gone through the ACTFL, which is the national conference, was here in Boston this year. So 2 teachers from the junior high went, 2 teachers from the high school, myself. So they brought back, different information to share with colleagues based on what they understood and learned at that conference. The keynote is a chef, Jose Andres, who is now in Ukraine. He's a Spaniard and is providing meals to the refugees and people involved in the war situation in the Ukraine, which I think is the height of humanitarianism for somebody who is selfless and putting himself in danger to do this work, which was extremely needed and to use the word kind doesn't even approach what he's doing. Otherwise, there are other things that go on in MAFLA. I am a member of the MAFLA board, and I am an officer and will be president of MAFLA next year. So that just means that I run meetings, but I get to interact with teachers from all over the state, and we're involved in a variety of professional development things and opportunities, workshop sessions, which is the value I see of MAFLA, because I have always taken part in its professional development for my own classes and now bring it back to teachers who are also sharing those same experiences by attending. So that's also a good thing. Running meetings is a little different. We talk about what goes on in the professional development, but we have a lot of structural things to do. Committee work takes place. My focus is on leadership and organizational development. So it all comes together to provide teachers and students with high quality professional development. We've also applied for another grant from the Department of Ed, which is 2 prongs. One is, again, for testing. If we get it, I will test from grades 7 through 12 and, again, apply it as final exams. And the other prong is to constantly work on the curriculum alignment guides and the standard alignment guides, and tentatively have asked one of the major consultants to work with us this summer in developing those guides for, instruction. We still have not heard whether Falmouth will be the recipient. I know I had to have the information in September, but it's taken a long time, especially because it's got to go through so many channels, one of whom is Governor Baker. So it is all for the good. It's just that we at this time don't have any idea whether we are, again, a recipient. We hope we are, and that information should come through in the next few weeks. Here with me today is Carla Steele, the newest addition to the World Language Department in the high school at FHS. Carla teaches Spanish and teaches levels 1, 2, and 3. And I'm thankful that you're able to spend this time with us today. and hope you don't mind that sharing some of your background information. Because when she interviewed, I was fascinated by the story of how she arrived in the United States and how she got here. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? She's Nicaraguan.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for hiring me.
Oh.
And I am very glad you did. I am loving Falmouth. My name is Carla Steele, and I am a Spanish teacher.
What was your maiden name?
Carla Jarquin.
Jarquin.
Jarquin, with a J, you know, the Jarquin.
Okay.
And it's funny because everyone sees my last name and they
Doesn't
don't
think you're Latina.
Yes, they don't think I'm a Latina. But yes, I was born in Managua, Nicaragua. I came here when I was 9 years old, and my family left the country when the revolution started with the Sandinistas. My country was at war, and
I was in Costa Rica at the time.
Wow.
And I think it was Costa Rica. Yes, and having a beverage with my colleague.
Well, Nicaragua was at war.
When a German reporter came over to talk to us.
Wow.
And he explained that he was on site in the midst of all this. And I was just fascinated.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, it was fascinating. I mean, even everything I saw as a little kid, you don't realize there's actually a war going on.
Right.
But I remember my parents saying, pack your bags. We're going on a little vacation. And here I am putting my doll and my little things in a bag, thinking we're going on a vacation, but we're not coming back. So as adults, for them, this was it was very hard, for the economy, for a lot of American businesses pulled out. I mean, that's the first thing they do, European businesses, when the country is at war. So we did come to the United States. My father was a professor, was a college professor, and we were granted a visa to come here. But little did my family know, and we didn't even tell our family in Nicaragua that we were going to, come stay here until things got better, which they're still not better. You still have Daniel Ortega back in power in Nicaragua. And we were here, but because we came here during a war, my family was granted political asylum.
Oh,
So we were granted political asylum.
And you came to Miami.
We came to Miami
First,
because that's where all of friends and relatives, easiest way is to come into Miami.
Yeah.
And it's like being in Nicaragua because everybody speaks
yes.
Spanish. The food, you have Little Havana, Cuba.
Yes.
I mean, you have the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, the Colombians. I mean, it's but we were there for a couple years, and my brother and I weren't learning English. We weren't, and my parents really weren't getting jobs. They were. So my aunt lived here in Massachusetts and said to my parents, you should move to Massachusetts. The education system is great, the job opportunities, education, and I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did, and we moved here, and I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful to be here.
So we're thrilled that she's here too, because she was teaching in Algonquin, living in Bourne and making that commute every day. So when she saw the ad in the paper, she immediately applied, and thankfully, she now only has a 15-minute commute, and we have a fantastic new Spanish teacher.
Thank you. Yes, right over the bridge. I taught at Algonquin for 22 years, right out of college, and my husband and I, we moved to Bourne. So a whole year I commuted back and forth thinking I was going to be able to do it for the rest of my career. And after a year of doing it, I said, I can't do this. This is too much. So when I saw the ad in the paper, I said, oh, Falmouth is right there. I can apply. So I'm very glad that was available.
So are we. What differences do you see between the Algonquin school system, the department, the students, and here? Similarities, differences?
A lot of similarities, and I think I was very picky when I was looking, for a job nearby. I didn't want to just go to any school. I wanted to make sure that it was a school that I would enjoy. I would love being a part of that community. And everyone I talked to, some of my neighbors, they had at the Cape, when I would see people, they had wonderful things to say about the Falmouth community.
Oh, good.
And being here, the school is beautiful. The school is state of the art, everything. I mean, from here, this room, to the arts, the extracurriculars.
When I arrived, we had 2/3 of the building stuffed in 1/3 because it was still in the process of, finishing up the construction. So, yeah, and I can't remember how long. I remember having, we were all in the gymnasium side, and the first office I shared with the social studies department chair. And when students would come in, they'd say to me, "Mr. Pillar, you live in half a shoebox." It was so small.
Oh, yeah.
And you could only, one person at a time I could walk behind my desk, but nobody else could fit back there. You had to go one at a time. It was so small.
Wow.
And then when it was completed, it's...
Oh, no, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
I love the arts. All around. That's my favorite. I love the room with in the middle there with all the plants. It just it's a lot of similarities in both communities. Wonderful communities. The families, they want their best for their kids. A great education. They want their kids to be safe here. My colleagues, they all work very hard. They want to give the best to the kids as well.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. I'm glad it was a very similar change.
So let's talk a little bit about your classes. How do you? I've been in her classes. I'm just fascinated. It's like nonstop. I like to be in a dynamic environment, and believe me, she has one. From watching something to hearing something to listening to working to talking to, there's just something. It's nonstop educational, and of course she's a native speaker, so that's perfect. For many reasons. I mean, she doesn't have to think about the language at all, but she can bring the different pieces of her culture also to her teaching. And as anybody that has worked abroad or traveled abroad knows, studied abroad, every little town has its specific vocabulary and colloquialisms, and so all of that comes with her. And she can give the students a very rich background in Central America, I'm sure.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about your classes, how you have all levels 1, 2, and 3.
They're all very different. And I do enjoy bringing my culture,
Sure.
in my teaching. I think sometimes, here you are teaching them a certain topic, and they're just, and then as soon as I say, this is what I used to do when I was a child, and then I give them a little short story, and they're like, really? And they're more fascinated in my stories of my childhood or what I eat at home, the certain dishes that I make, that I say, or the certain things that I celebrate. They're like, really? Wow. So it's they read about it, but they don't know
now they have
person that actually.
Now they're up close and personal.
Yes.
That's
I think
good.
sometimes when I see them maybe starting to doze off or fall asleep, sometimes a little story, wakes them up a little.
No,
it interests them, I guess.
That's excellent. I can't imagine anybody falling asleep in your classroom.
Oh, thank you.
Because there's always something going on.
Muchas gracias.
De nada. So, anything else you'd like to share with us about teaching in general, or you've talked about your background, you've talked about the community, you've talked about your classes. Anything you would like to message you would like to leave with? What are your goals for, in the, we'll say your next 5, not that, but what are your goals for your classes, and what are your, I know your expectations are high, but what do you want your students to get out of your?
I want them to enjoy the language, to also realize, for many years you have kids that say, why do I need to learn another language for? But I think now, this new generation, I think they're very worldly. and they do want to.
That's what
and
they.
I think because of social media,
Oh, yeah.
they can communicate with anyone around the world. So I think that's changing in regards to.
That's what they do say about Generation Z or whatever. This, is it Y or Z or X or I've lost track.
Yes,
but
I've
they
lost
say,
track of this new generation.
They say that it is a global thought process. They are beyond, their own little scope, but really invested in.
They're interested in what's going on around the world.
That's excellent.
And they're very involved in many things, not just in their community but outside their community. So they're starting to get the importance of learning a different language, different cultures.
So we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit because we have brought them a long way. I mean,
yes,
that's
and now
that's huge.
Finally, they're maybe accepting it.
That's huge. Yes,
Yes.
I used to have them in another district say to me, "What am I learning Spanish for? I'm never going to Spain." Okay, one thing is you're 15. How do you know where your life is going to take you? Number two, why is it just Spain? What about the islands, Central America, South America, Mexico?
Right.
And now you practically can go anywhere and meet a member of another culture. I live in Boston, so you can imagine, on a daily basis, there are all different ethnic backgrounds and races. So that's only healthy for, students to encounter.
Right.
So, well, I want to thank you very much for
Thank you for having me.
sharing all of your insights and your information. And as I said before, we're so grateful that Carla is here with us because she's because she's a native speaker, she's got a whole different perspective, and she can share that with students. And she's an excellent teacher.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
De nada.